Welcome to the Student Ministry Podcast. My name is Steve Cullum, and here we are at episode 34 of the Student Ministry Podcast. We are so grateful that you are here again with another great conversation with another student pastor. And today we are going to be talking to James Sabin. James is the youth and family pastor at Kingdom Church in Westover, West Virginia. And James has an amazing story of what God has done through his life, especially in the recent last few years. God's done some great things in his life up until then, but over the last few years, James has been dealing with some burnout and some depression and some other things that has entered into his life and affected his ministry. And even in the middle of great things happening in his ministry, and he just realized that this was not the path that he was supposed to be going through, and really experienced some burnout. And he's going to tell that story today, and I'm so excited for you to hear it because I know that some of you listening to this podcast might be going through something very similar. And maybe you are experiencing the first few stages of burnout, or maybe you're right in the middle of burnout right now, or maybe you're actually going through it and you can't notice it. And you think things are going well, maybe like James, and then all of a sudden, there might be some time, maybe it's today as you're listening to this, where God's going to reveal some things about how you're going about your life and your ministry and everything that need to change so that you don't experience burnout and you don't experience things that are worse than that. So I'm so excited for you to hear today from James. I'm excited for you to hear this and not only have it affect you, but maybe there's someone else out there that as you hear James today, you think, man, they need to hear this as well. I need to share this with someone. So please do share this with someone else in ministry, or maybe someone that's just that's not necessarily in ministry, but just needs to also hear encouraging words like that James is going to be talking about today. So make sure you do that. Make sure you subscribe. And we love the fact that you keep coming back month after month. But before we jump into this conversation, I want to thank our sponsors, because we also love our sponsors. They are what makes this happen. You coming back every month to hear another message from another youth pastor, you hearing these stories, the youth pastors and the youth workers that are able to share their stories, all that plays in with our sponsors to make this podcast so great. And today I want to thank WorkCamp NE. If you are not familiar with WorkCamp NE, they've been our longest sponsor almost from the very beginning. And WorkCamp is a fantastic ministry that takes your students into the mission field in the United States. And what they do is that they partner with local organizations, and they find out the needs in the community, specifically around home repairs. And they go and they do all the work for you. They do all the partnerships, the conversations, the checking out the homes and all that sort of thing, and figure out what's needed. And then they create an environment where you can come in, bring your students, and maybe it's a private thing, or maybe you join with several other youth groups, and you go to their camps during the summer, and it's an entire week, and you go and serve the local people and just love on them and just some awesome things. And it's an amazing week. It's coupled with worship and some awesome devotions and just this amazing week. And so if you have not checked out WorkCamp NE's website, make sure you do that. That's at WorkCampne.com, and show them some love. We are so grateful for their sponsorship of today's podcast. And with all that being said, let's jump into this conversation with James Sabin today. Well, thanks again for joining us today, James.
Sure, you bet. My honor, really, Steve.
So there's a lot to talk about today. I know some people may know of you already, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't yet. So I'd like you to start just with a quick summary of who you are and how God got you into student ministry and what that all looks like.
Yeah, was born in New York City, so that comes as a surprise to a lot of people because I've been living in West Virginia for over 20 years. Raised on the Jersey Shore, and I literally was a Jersey Shore boy. I mean, pretty much if you watch that show, which I hope people don't, but if they do watch that show, even characters, that was very close to how me and my friends behaved and lived and grew up. And in fact, one of the characters, Sammy Sweetheart, she actually went to my high school.
No way.
So yeah, so like that whole culture is very it's just, it hits home. And if you want to know what I was like before Jesus, just watch an episode of that show, and that's pretty close. Nice. Yeah. And wound up I was an athlete and wrestled, played soccer, baseball, hockey, but the two sports that I excelled at was wrestling and soccer, and found my way over time at West Virginia University, where I did both, and somewhere during that time, especially at the age of 21, gave everything, all that I was, to Jesus. Had met him a little earlier, but that was just kind of more like a taste and see that he was good, and then it was at 21 and a half that I got tired of kind of doing life on my own, tired of the party scene, tired of, the benefits of what you get status-wise as a D1 athlete, and said, I thought this would make me happy. I thought this would make my life full, and I was still very empty. And it was a lot of good teammates. Actually, my wrestling coach, Nate Carr, who was a 3-time world champion, Olympian, he was a strong, strong Christian. And God used him mightily to bring me really close to Jesus. So cool. I can go into a whole lot of other ways that God used that and brought me back to himself, but that's kind of the quick and short of it. Yeah.
Nice. So where did student ministry kind of fall in the whole thing? Was that, like you said, it kind of was, you didn't really fully know Jesus, I'm assuming as a teenager. So was it your own experience, or was that kind of later on?
Yeah, so it was later on. So as I was being discipled, it was a guy from my soccer team who went to this church called Covenant, and so when I started going to church with him, it was in no time that they kind of put me in as a student ministry leader. I think it was probably only like 6 months or so, or maybe a little longer than that. And they said, "Hey, would you like to be a student ministry leader?" And I was like, sure. I was already, now, of course, I was already going to school for, my degrees in education. So, that kind of, that wasn't too foreign, obviously being around the kids. I was doing all sorts of practicums and stuff and labs with kids in the schools, and I was only a year and a half away from student teaching at that point. And
nice.
So, sure. Yeah. Not a super stretch, of course, but my spiritual walk or maturity, yeah, probably a little too soon, but God used all of it. And I like to say, as we see in our leaders, and I know you do too, Steve, that I don't think any leaders grow faster than youth ministry leaders. I think they grow the fastest.
Yep.
So anyway.
Yep. I had some leaders in my previous ministry that absolutely love serving, and they said on numerous occasions that's where they've grown the most was because they got involved, and they knew they weren't far along, and some of them actually got baptized after they were helping. Now, they professed Christ and everything ahead of time, sure, and all that sort of thing. But actually, like, because of their involvement and everything, they fell more in love with Jesus and wanted to take those next steps in their faith. And it's been really cool to see our leaders grow in addition to our students.
Yeah, I see that a ton over and over again. We see that all the time. We just did an event and we have like a group of course, our main leaders that are consistent. Then, of course, we have volunteer leaders that are for our big events. And one guy was new this year and came to us up at the end of it, and he had tears in his eyes, and he says, "Oh my gosh," he goes, "I had no idea." He goes, "I needed to be doing this so long ago." He goes, "But I'm glad I finally did it now." And he says he had no idea. And I said it actually at our meeting. I said, I'm most excited for you guys who this is going to be your first event with youth and watching God work in their lives, because there's just something about it, and you just don't know till you experience it, and that's just cool. So anyway,
that's really great. And so God grabbed your heart and never looked back, huh?
No, yeah, Vince stayed at that church. I actually became a teacher at that church. Was over. My wife and I were over the middle school for a little while, and then God actually called me to a senior pastor role. And I got a church plant. So that church planted us, and it was a brand new startup, from scratch. And, of course, I was the senior pastor and the youth pastor. And that never went away. In fact, we always I believe you bring in who you are. You know what I mean? You draw who you are. And we were always the people who were drawn in and attracted to our church were always youth people. Like, it was just crazy. And so all of our outreaches were pretty much youth outreaches. You know what I mean? So we were pretty much running a church that was a large youth group.
That sounds awesome.
That was pretty much it for 8 years, and I never lost that. I'm the one who took the kids to, of course, like I said, I was the youth pastor and the senior pastor, so I was the one who took the kids to retreats and camps. Still, none of that changed. I still was a speaker. So I never disconnected from the youth at all. And like I said, if anything, we probably just just probably increased it while I was there. So it was pretty cool. Then I wound up at the church I am today. Okay. So anyway, as the youth and family pastor now. So I was there, like church plant pastor for 8 years at, and now I've been for almost 10 years at where I am now. And I ministered, at least I can't remember now. So the years just, they blur together now.
Yeah.
I think it was 3 or 4 years I was just a youth leader before I became, 5 or 6 years. I apologize. Now I remember my age. 5 or 6 years I was a youth leader. So anyway, there you go.
Cool. So we're going to dive into more of your story in just a bit, because there's a lot that we're going to talk about today. But before we jump into that, let's talk about your ministry. What's it look like at your current church? What do students experience on a weekly basis, and what does your current role look like?
Yeah. So what youth ministry looks like at our church is a youth and family ministry, and so it's intentional from the beginning. We're pretty much with Orange curriculum. You know what I mean? Okay. We're intentionally ministering to parents. We believe parents are the main influence in their children's lives. Of course, Deuteronomy 6. You know what I mean? And so that's something that we're very open about and upfront, platform, and all the way through. We have a very healthy church culture that is very for the youth. The youth is always prominent. When I got there, the senior pastor, Pastor Kevin, he's amazing. He's just had a heart for youth from the beginning. He himself did pretty much, he did like FCA, and he did FCA for years. And even as a senior pastor, which was pretty amazing. And so when I got in there, it was very easy. I always say that anyone could have came into the culture and the environment that I got into and could be successful because of how the kids were a priority in that church. So Kevin right away said when they were starting to grow and he couldn't do the youth ministry anymore, he needed someone that could be focused and do that alone. We were friends. We've been friends for now over 20 years, and we were just hanging out together. And he said, James, I know this may sound crazy. I know you're a senior pastor. He goes, but your heart's always been youth. You're a youth guy. You're the guy who helped me, because I actually helped him do a youth program years ago when he was starting his church. Okay. He said that he goes, just pray about it. And I was like, and at first I was like, no way. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's going backwards, right? But I mean, it was in no time that God just started working on my heart and, talked to my wife, and we're just sitting there like, okay, like this sounds crazy. But Lord, we're going to trust you. And so sure enough, we jumped into that ministry, that culture. And and like I said, super supportive of youth and prioritize youth. The budget for the youth is just great. From tip to toe. I don't care what age demographic we're talking about. They support the young people of our church. It's just really special. I love it.
That's really cool. So, so you oversee a team of other staff right now. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I'm over. So I do all the youth ministry and then the children's ministry too. Okay. And so a little bit of that. I'm also we like to say we laugh. It's a quasi exec because while the church was growing, it was me, Kevin. We had an associate, and then that associate kind of left, and so. Because I had a senior pastor background, we were kind of, both pastors for a little while, and then we had someone else in. And so I always took on, as the church was growing, me and Kevin were always taking on roles, which, of course, leads into part of my story of burnout and how all that happened Wow. So it's unique, not necessarily over the college, even though I'm kind of there for that first year. Uh-huh. But most of our leaders are college leaders now, kids who came through the edge and now are our leaders, but they're a huge part of our college ministry and actually help lead it. And it's just really cool. It's a lot of fun.
Cool. Yeah. So one of my questions, I'd love to know, do you have middle school and high school together or separate? And we were kind of going through one of those questions of now, like, how's the next step of our ministry go? Like, how do you guys run your programs on a regular basis?
I think ideally, and I think my education background kind of informed me early on this was, they're just developmentally different on so many levels. You know what I mean? And so ideally, if you can separate them, do that. But if you can't, it's okay. Like it's not like this thing ain't going to implode. Obviously, we know that. And you know what I mean? Like it's not the worst thing in the world. And so initially when I started, there was really no youth group. And so we had to start with everyone. In fact, I think we started with 6 kids, and I don't even think it was that many. So that was where we landed. And we said, I said, hey, you've got to have a crowd. You know what I mean? We got to focus on Sunday. We wanted our Sunday meeting, our big meeting, to just be great, and we focused on that. And of course, that's purpose-driven youth. That's Doug Fields, and so that was our thing. We were going to Just going to start there. And then as we grew, I always had in the plan, we're going to split them up when we feel like we have, you have to have a leader, you know what I mean? You can't just split them up and then look for a leader. You have to have a leader in place first and then split them up. And it came together. I think after 2 years, I did Tuesday night and Sunday nights. So I did Tuesday for middle school, Sunday nights, and I was the guy, of course, at the time. And it was, it wasn't bad at first, you know what I mean? And because you didn't have that much responsibility yet, because things were just growing. And then as things grew, the weight got a little heavier. But I had great people kind of raise up. God brought in the artisans, so to speak, and so we were able to start a middle school group and high school group at the same time. I think it's after about 2 years, we were able to do that, which was really cool. And that was it. We haven't looked back since. So, cool. Yeah, I think it's based on, how many kids you have. And then it's based on, do you have the personnel? Do you have that person who's going to be able to I don't know if maybe for that person, maybe you're going to be the middle school person and they're going to be the high school person, or maybe they're going to be the high school person. You know what I mean? It's based on, where you're at.
Yeah. Cool. So we alluded a little bit to the fact that you had some burnout there and a lot on your plate. So I know the last few years have been a big time in your growth. Some really low times as well. So let's dive into that a little bit, because I know there's I'm sure some other youth pastors listening, some youth workers that are listening that are maybe in a very similar position, and maybe they're on the verge of burnout, or maybe they're experiencing it right now, or maybe they're just oblivious and they don't realize that is where they are. And so paint us a little picture of what happened in your life to lead you through that hard time and where you are now.
Yeah, I shared a little bit of this at DYM 200 this past year, not too long ago, actually, just a couple months ago. And I think what I said there is we were starting to grow, and our to-do list was increasing, and we weren't increasing our staff. And so, that's a recipe for disaster eventually. We just, life's already full for a lot of us, and we just kept putting more on the plate. As I illustrated at the conference, if you ever seen that Seinfeld episode, where Kramer goes to the car dealership, and they're like, okay, and he gets the car dealer with him, and they're like, how far can we drive this car and empty? And that was me, and I ran out of gas, and I just kept pressing that gas. And as I heard someone say before, you keep pressing the gas, and you're going to flood the engine, and that's exactly what happened. And it was rough. The only way I can explain it was when that all came down and that all hit, and I ran out of gas, so to speak. Carrie Newhoff has a great article on Burnout. I think I shared that with you when we were kind of talking a little bit before. And everything he describes in there, like my passion just dropped. Like I just felt like I was just no emotion, no passion, no drive, like numb. And I had never felt that. Someone with my background, kind of my energy level, I'd never felt that. I'd never suffered from any kind of mental illness. So, so all of this was very new to me. Just really dark thoughts. Thoughts I've never had before at that level, and just felt like I was really stuck. The good news is my senior pastor was with me, and he had some experience in this area himself. He himself had experienced burnout and some rough times, and I'm not sharing anything he hasn't shared publicly. And and I'm so glad he was there, because I was able to right away process with him, and he gave me hope, even though I didn't feel hope. I knew, that feeling of hope wasn't there, but there was, I was still somehow able to just mentally say, okay, somehow I'm going to be okay, even though there's no way I feel like I'm going to be okay. And just little by little, kind of took us through the steps, talked with my wife, and just let her know what to expect, let me know what to expect, let us know what to expect together, and how we can get through this, how that this wasn't going to be a dead end, that this didn't have to end in any kind of disaster or ultimate darkness, but that God had a plan through it. Wow. And but when it hit, it was really scary, really scary.
Yeah. So did you see it coming at all, or did it kind of come out of the blue?
So so like there's Carrie Newhoff's book, right?
Yeah.
As you can tell, I'm a huge Carrie Newhoff fan. I don't know if we can plug him, right? But anyway,
sure. Carrie's a great guy.
But anyway, now that I look back, I see it all. Like I see it easy, actually, and I do see it in other people now. Which I'm not in a judgmental way. Like, oh man, if things don't change, and people have been able to tell me the story. But like I was starting to self-medicate. That's going to be a big thing. You start self-medicating. Like for me, this is people know this now, but I mean, when I gave my life, heart, soul, mind, and strength to Jesus at 21 and a half, I stopped. I was a huge drinker, partier, drugs, all that stuff, and I stopped drinking. And somewhere along the lines, when so I didn't touch alcohol in 20 years. And somewhere along the lines in there, I thought, well, because a lot of my good, I don't know, I know we're different Christians. I know they have different beliefs about this, but I had a lot of good Christian friends who drank. I don't see drinking as a sin, you know what I mean? I don't think that is a sin, but obviously drunkenness is. And so a lot of my good friends would hang out. They'd have a beer or two, whatever. And I said, you know what? I think I can have a beer. And, with my, and I was justifying it with, it's with my buddies, and these are good senior pastors and great men of God. And you know what I mean? And why not, and just good Christian men. And they are. But God had specifically told me not to anymore. And I, for whatever reasons, because of my past, because of, maybe because I'd have a, affinity to it, you know what I mean? Or whatever. And it'd be a problem for me. He told me no. And, but because I was in need of something, that's what I chose. Never got wasted, never got drunk, anything like that. But, started to drink. And, again, sure. Was it in the sense of biblical sin? No, there was no sin there, but in the sense of, had God called me not to? Yeah, I was sinning. And, that was one aspect. Just always when you talk to me, hey, busy, just the badge of business was so prevalent. Like I wore it with such honor. Yeah, I did this, and people would say to me, "You're so busy." Yes, thank you. I was like, oh, and it was, for me, it was just like, they'd say like, "Hey, when can we meet?" And I show them my calendar, and I'm like, "Oh, let's week, 2 weeks from now." And they're like, "Whoa," you know what I mean? I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know how I do it." You know what I mean? Like that. Kind of stuff. It wasn't good, and it was crazy because nobody was able to say, like, that's wrong. Like, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Everyone applauded it.
Right.
Even in church. And I wish someone would have come along and said, dude, your calendar's messed up. Like, you're actually out of control, and there's no way I'm going to applaud you for this. Like, I wish someone would have said that to me. I say that to people now. Yeah. I really do, and they don't like it. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I don't care if you don't like it. Like, I'm telling you, this is not healthy. Like, when did you take a day off? Last week. I didn't. Okay, that's not good. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but anyway, we can get into that later. But I mean, I get into a whole thing about Sabbath because that God taught me a ton just about Sabbath alone through this process. Anyway, but it was about that happened almost 3 years ago now when that all kind of went down.
Wow. Nice. Yeah. Wow. So, and you said your senior pastor was there. He experienced it and everything. So kind of walk us through that a little bit, like when that all kind of came to a head and you realized something needed to change.
Yeah, I was forced to change because I was in a position where I didn't know if I was going to make it to the next day, and that scared the heck out of me. When you have that feeling of, I couldn't walk by, I don't tell this to many people, but I couldn't walk by a set of kitchen knives without thinking some really dark stuff. And like I said, I don't I don't really share that openly too much, but I know someone out there is listening and understands that, you know what I mean? And I knew I had to change things. And I'll never forget that it was the Monday after we had come back. So it had been 3 or 4 days afterwards, and me and Kevin had talked. And when I'd come back from the conference where this all happened, like I was at a conference when this happened, and that feeling happened, and it all just kind of went numb, and it all just hit me like a ton of bricks. It was about 3 or 4 days afterwards, and all I can think was, oh my gosh, if this has its way with me, my wife's not going to have a husband and my kids are not going to have a dad. And I went to our sanctuary that morning, and I just broke down, and I said, God, you have got to do something. I need you more than ever in my life. And it was just like his presence became so real in that moment. More real than probably in a long time. And I just knew I was going to be okay. It was kind of like I knew I still had to go through this, but I knew I was going to be okay. And anyway, so it was kind of like I just sensed, for like the next year, actually it was almost a year and a half, I spent every morning that I was at the church in that sanctuary for over an hour with Jesus, just the Bible, me, and my journal. And man, I can write a book on what he shared with me over a year of just spending that hour to hour and a half with him every day. And really what had happened, Steve, I'd forgotten my first love. I'd fallen in love with ministry. And I still love Jesus, don't get me wrong, but I don't know, the I would think for people is if maybe families get so caught up in family that the husband and wife, they get so caught up in the family and children or activities or their things that they forget that it was them who's the heart of the family. Yeah. They're the family, and their love for each other. And somewhere in there, I got so much doing for Jesus that I forgot him. And that was very evident right away when I first just really got back to that just really intentional, intimate time with him, that it was so clear that I'd forgotten my first love. Wow. And when I started to just spend that time with him and kind of rekindle that flame, so to speak, and allow him to just just grow my heart for him. Boy, it was so clear. And that's where real healing took place, Steve. I had great counseling. Don't get me wrong. Counseling was there. All that was there. But I'm telling you, you can't substitute that kind of time with Jesus. Mm-hmm. You can't. And what it did for me and still does for me, like now, like because of the longevity, like it's been almost 2.5 years now. And I can say I'm 100% now. Like, and I couldn't say that just at the 2-year point. Yeah. I was 90%. But, and I thought to myself for a while, I think we talked about this the last time when I was just sharing a little bit. I thought to myself, why so long, God? Yeah. Why so long? But there's something about longevity that creates a life change. That if it would have only been like, say that day, he would have just been like, okay, you're good. It's okay. I get it. You repented. We're fine. Would I have spent that 1.5 years with him in the sanctuary? No way. In fact, I'll never forget this. I was sitting in the sanctuary one day. And it was probably around 2, maybe a little under the 2-year mark. I don't know all the timelines, but it's in my journal. And I'm sitting there and I said, Jesus, why is this still here? Why am I still here? And I'm still experiencing some of this. And it wasn't as bad, but it was still there. You know what I mean? Kind of like, it was just kind of like a monkey on the shoulder a little bit. Yeah. And I was just kind of like, why is this still here? And he said, as clear as I can tell you, he said, would you still be here if it wasn't? And the answer was no. And so it's just so true. Like it was so true. And I just broke down and I was like, no, I need you. And he's what's most important. Yeah. Not that I was struggling with mental illness or anything like that. He was most important. And the beauty of it is I came to a place of peace where, you know what, Jesus, if it's Jesus and mental illness, I'll be okay. Yeah. If it's and whatever struggle we have or you have or people who are listening have, if it's Jesus and you're okay, but if it's just it's going to be okay. Yeah, you know what I mean. So anyway, but yeah.
That's great. And we've been in this series with our church over the last month. We call it Taboo. We just talked about 4 different taboo topics, and we also carried that into our youth group atmospheres as well. And we talked about suicide and self-harm, and we talked about addictions, and we talked about the tough things that a lot of times we turn to. And we spent a lot of time talking about Paul's life, because a lot of times Paul's like this amazing, pastor and mentor and missionary, but we don't often talk about the hard things about his life. And I remember reading about his thorn in his flesh, and people have different opinions on what that is and everything. But I often thought, like, through my study on that, I was like, maybe that was something that, whatever that was for him, that was something that he had to go through, and God didn't remove it because he needed to experience that. Kind of like what we were talking about. He could have easily just taken that and removed it from him. But he didn't, because he needed to experience whatever that was so that he would grow and continue his dependency upon Christ through it.
In fact, that's exactly what he says. He said, because of these great revelations, that I've experienced to keep me humble. And what's humility? Dependence, surrender. Yeah. To keep me surrendered, dependent on God, a thorn in the flesh, a messenger to buff me. Whether that was a messenger of like, hey, all this stuff you've tried, whether that was just a messenger that was just, just all, just kind of saying stuff, or whether it was physical. Either way, the goal is the same. Mm-hmm. And that was to bring him to a place of humility that I need Jesus in every and all situations. And so goal accomplished, mission accomplished. Yeah. And that's what God said. I can't remove this from you, Paul, because if I do, you'll think it's you. Yeah. Again, you'll think it's your strength. You'll think it's your ability and not my grace. Yeah. And that's what he said in the end, right? Paul, my grace is sufficient. Not what you think your grace abilities are, but my grace alone. Yeah. So that's exactly right. And I can have another journal in there that has all that stuff in there. That's
I'm sure. So you were in the middle of all this, and DYM 100 a couple years ago, and you meet Alan Fadling and heard about this unhurried living sort of thing. How did that enter into your life, and how did that play into your recovery?
Yeah, so around 2016, in September was DYM 100, the first DYM, and it was before that in April of 2016 where burnout that's when it hit me. That's when I experienced all this, actually between April and September, I would get some reprieves from some of the severe symptoms of burnout, and you name it, and depression, anxiety, and all that, just the darkness. I call it the funk. You know what I mean? Just the funk. But in September, when September came around, and right before DYM 100, and actually right at it, like as I was traveling, it was probably as bad as it was those first couple days. Like it was probably as bad as it ever been. You can actually see pictures of anyone during DYM 100. Like I was down to, I'm a size 34 pant waist. Not that people need to know that, but I was down at below 32. Like 32s were hanging. And it was like, you could see me on the screen. I know my audience can't, but if they follow me on social media, I ain't got that much to lose still. And you know what I mean? It was just bad. And here I am at the 100, and I'm like, okay, Lord, what do you got? I almost felt like, I remember sitting in my hotel in the lobby, and I couldn't get control of my thoughts at all in California, in Orange County. And I literally could not get control of my thoughts. And I felt just crazy, like literally crazy. And I sat in the lobby and cried. And that was really rough. And I just called my wife. I called Pastor Kevin, and I said, just pray for me. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to go. And sure enough, though, the next day I woke up and things were a little better, you know what I mean? And okay, still felt the funk, but it wasn't the nonstop thoughts weren't as, as there as much. And so the lack of control of thoughts really was what it was. And I was all right. So there we are, and we're at D100. And I think it's the second day. I can't remember, but Alan Fadling gets up and he starts to speak about his unhurried life, and up to that point, like I said, I'd been in the sanctuary. God had been showing me some things, but unhurried life really showed me this rhythm of life, and how to be still and how to listen. And I was doing some of that, but he really gave me some real clear practical steps on what that looks like. And so I can't encourage that book enough, because it really put some meat on the bones that God had already provided on that. And it just was able to bring me to this next level of I believe healing and growth. And so it was just, I keep the notes from his seminar to this day in my bag. And because they're just a constant reminder that, James, this isn't a race, that this is not about accomplishment, that God, Jesus loves me simply for me. And here was the big question that I had to wrestle with in the sanctuary one day, and that was, if I never ministered again, if I never did youth ministry again, if I never heard someone else say, "Great message, Pastor," or "Wow, wow, thanks so much for what you do for the youth," if I never heard any of that again, would that be enough? And the answer at the time was no. That no, I need that. Jesus, that you're not enough. And that was my honest answer. And somewhere between Alan Fadling and, another, however long in that sanctuary, Jesus became enough. And that was the beauty, and that I can say that now easy. Like if I never do youth ministry, do I love youth ministry? Sure, love it, but I love Jesus. Like if I never do youth ministry again, I know who I am in Christ now. And I know that's a process. I don't expect. I mean, listen, I'm 44, Steve. Like, and I'm just getting this. You know what I mean? Like, like, I wish I would have gotten that. I don't expect a 20-year-old to get that. I think there's some developmental things that are developmental, and you can't you can't expect a 1-year-old to run, like really run. Right. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? But somewhere in there, if they have a starting, if that's a goal though, that's different. You know what I mean? Like if someone could tell that 20-year-old and that 25-year-old and that 30-year-old that your goal isn't ministry, but your goal is to be rooted and grounded in your Savior and your Lord and your friend, Jesus Christ, and that's the goal, that, they got something to really they're going to be on the right path. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's going to help a lot. So I wish someone would have came along, and I'm sure, here's the truth, they did. Now that I think about it, right? They did, and I just didn't listen.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, man, to get to that point where, Paul does, and Jesus says it's like he is enough for us. But it's so often we say that, we preach it, we teach it. But
right.
Do we actually believe it ourselves? Yeah. Like, or are we hanging our hats on our ministry and our families and all these other things, and pretending that Jesus is enough when really we also want these other things too?
Yeah, and I like the way you said that, Steve, because I don't even know if I was pretending. I believed he was enough.
Yeah.
Like until he wasn't. Right. Like that makes sense.
Yeah.
I really believed he was enough until I learned that no, my heart. Like the Bible is clear. We don't know our own hearts, and Jesus only knew my heart, and He knew that He wasn't enough in my heart. But I thought He was until He showed me He wasn't.
Yeah.
So.
Man, I know God has clearly taught you so much, but going back to if you could do it all over again, or to tell other youth pastors that are maybe going through similar sort of things, what are some steps that they can start taking now to either prevent this from happening, or maybe to come out of it? I know you talked about Sabbath. I'd love to hear a little bit of your thoughts about the importance of Sabbath.
Yeah. You reminded me of two other things, but I do want to hit Sabbath. If you would remind me to hit those two other points as well. For me, Sabbath was huge. Like I was just talking to a coworker of mine, and he said, "Man, I've just been so busy, and I just said to him, I said, have you been able to take a day off? And he said, no, I haven't. He goes, I don't have time. And I said, let me ask you a quick question. I wasn't trying to be like legalistic or like condemning. But he was a friend, and I could say this to him, and I said, do you think Jesus ever missed a Sabbath? Because it says, as was his custom, you know what I mean? Like that. And he's like, no. And I was like, well, then what makes you think if Jesus I believe he needed Sabbath, and not only was he obeying a command, but he obeyed that command because it was out of necessity for himself and obedience to his Father, but because of the love relationship. I said, what makes you think that you and I can get away with not having a Sabbath? And he just kind of looked, and I said, if you trust Jesus with this, and you trust that he promises to give us rest first, and rest first, so that we can be active with him. And that's the thing, like Sabbath's about being with him, and Sabbath sets the foundation for being with him and doing ministry with him. Because when we get in the nonstop and the rhythm of which is really no rhythm at all, of activity, and going from one thing to the other and checking off the boxes, you will leave Jesus behind. Like Jesus will no longer be with you. You know what I mean? Like you will be far ahead of him. And what Sabbath does, it's a reset. And it reminds us that, because the first key thing about Sabbath is relationship with Christ. The second aspect of Sabbath is relationship with others. And the third aspect of Sabbath is recreation, I believe. Like do things that you like God has given us all things to enjoy, but not all things, but only he's to be worshipped. And so enjoyment and worship are two different things. But in that worship of Christ, we can enjoy recreation, those things that we enjoy and bring life, and that needs to be first with Jesus and then with people who are made in his image, to take that time to, because when we're at rest and we slow down, we recognize when our spouses are are also themselves anxious or overburdened, or because a lot of times we just get caught in our own world.
Right.
When you're going 100 miles an hour, you don't recognize when anyone else is tired or hurting, or you know what I mean, or needs encouragement, or they themselves need a day off. You know what I mean? Like we're in our own little world, and so we miss it because we're not being present. We're not being in the moment. And Sabbath does so much, and I can go a whole bunch in Sabbath. But the way I see Sabbath now is, it's like if, for people who are married or people who had boyfriends or girlfriends or whatever it is, or even just your mother or whoever, that special day. Like I know daddies take some of their daughters on daddy-daughter dates, right? And those special moments. I believe Sabbath is like that for Jesus and his kids, that we get to take that special time with just him. And when I think of it like that, it bothers me that I forfeited hundreds of days with Jesus like that because I was too busy. That bothers me. When I see it that way now, there's no way I'm missing that day. There's no way I'm going to miss that day with Jesus. I love, like for me, it's Wednesday. And for me, it starts Tuesday night, like I said, between 6 and 7 or 8 based on my schedule a little bit. And it goes till Wednesday, 6, 7, or 8. And I have a couple of reasons for that. But, again, I believe the Jewish calendar, that was for, that's the way they, Hebrew day starts, et cetera, et cetera. And, but for me, like to think of how many I missed over the years, like from the time I started teaching in ministry in my early 20s to 41, how many Sabbaths I forfeited, and let's just not even it's called Sabbath, how many days of intentional intimacy with Jesus I forfeited because I had a to-do list. Because that was more important than my Jesus. And man, I'm not doing that anymore. Yeah. Because he's enough. He's worth it. And now I love, like, I live from Sabbath to Sabbath now. That is really cool. Like I really do. And I'm Wednesday to Wednesday, Sabbath, Jesus time. I get to spend time with Jesus. Like I get to spend time with my daddy. Like that is there. And I'm not saying that it's like this perfect thing all the time where some days I'm like, I don't struggle with it. Like, yeah, I still do. But when you kind of been put through the ringer a little bit, and when you were almost not going to make it, it's a lot easier now for me to live in it because I'm desperate. You know what I mean? Like, and now I understand that it's not just desperation now, but now it's inspiration. I'm inspired now, and that's good. And I'm also not ignorant that probably over time, that as the feeling of what I experienced becomes not just months and months away, but becomes years away, that I'm sure my flesh is going to be, I'm going to be like, oh well, I can miss this Sabbath now, and then I can miss that Sabbath now, right? Because it's a little further down the road, and that works, right? That's just human nature, and but right now that's not there. But I'm not ignorant to think down the road that's not going to be there. It definitely will be. And I got some journals that I keep in certain places that'll remind me that it just needs to be enough, and I need to not miss that time with them.
That's so good, so good. There's a couple other things that you kind of you remember to share about that.
Yeah, the other thing is I burn out with my face in the Bible. So a lot of people think like you burn out and like no, I was spending a ton of time with Jesus. But it was mostly just for him. Like it was a lot of my studies, and if I was doing some creative stuff and creating content, and it was a ton. I mean, I have a Bible that is marked up from that time that after I burn out, I couldn't look at it because it brought such bad feelings that I put away for a year and a half. And it wasn't until a year and a half, Steve, that I could pick it up again because it reminded me of, look at you. It was almost like a badge of honor. Look how much I got inductive Bible study method. You know what I mean? Like all that stuff. And it was for me, it was just like, it upset me. I was disappointed in myself that I allowed the Bible to become this textbook and to become this tool for just teaching. And sure, I still had great moments with Jesus and et cetera. But it was a lot of for. And there's two scriptures that I believe continue to keep me grounded. The first one is Acts 6, when I believe it was the Hellenistic widows. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Where they were starting to distribute. There's a distribution, right, for them, and so you had the Hebrew widows and the Hellenistic widows, and there was this kind of thing going on. It got too much. They got overwhelmed, and the apostles were doing that ministry at the time. They were the ones, as they called, waiting tables, right? Yep. And they finally said, this is too much. Like this waiting tables, this ministry is taking us away from our primary calling. And so they gathered, and of course, how it goes. They gathered some of the elders. They said, let's look for men filled with the Holy Spirit, right? And that's where Sabin was chosen from. Sabin was picked out of that group, of course. And sure enough, but the key thing they say is, hey, listen, pick from amongst yourself men filled with the Spirit who can do this ministry. But we have to devote ourselves to prayer and the Word. Devote means nothing else comes in between. Devote's almost the same word as worship, right?
Yeah.
And so we need to devote ourselves. Like, this needs to be the centrality of who we are and what we do. And it doesn't mean you don't wait tables. Yeah, we better pick up some brooms, you know what I mean, and help clean up after an event, right? But that's not that should not be what we're characterized by. That as those called to minister, we need to devote ourselves to the Word of God and prayer, and so that became that constant foundational thing. Like, yeah, I have this to do and this to do, but I need to make sure this happens first. I need to devote myself to prayer and the reading of the Word, not for teaching. No, for just Jesus feeding me, Jesus teaching me. I'm being silent and I'm listening to my master, and my friend, and so and that's been real critical. Of course, the other one I shared at DYM, and that of course is the story of Mary and Martha, and everyone knows that story. Of course, who's listening, no doubt, and and what's the big takeaway from that? Of course, Martha's frantic, and Jesus just says to her, as she goes into town or to rat on her sister, where I'm from, we say rat, right? And she goes to rat on her sister, but she says, and Jesus turns and he says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted. Listen to that word, distracted by many things. And man, that just hit me because I was distracted. Not so worried. Being worried wasn't my nature, but if I think about it, I was driven by anxiety at times. I was driven by worry. Like, I allowed worry, like the worry of what people would think if I didn't do this the right way, what parents would say. I was worried by if kids wouldn't like my message. I was worried. My motivation wasn't love all the time. My motivation was self-preservation. That's what worry's about. Was I going to keep my name? Was I going to keep my reputation? Was I going to keep up the standard that I had, whatever, attributed to, like whatever. That's God's not in that. He was able to work through it because because of His grace, but He's not in that. I mean, that's not who He is. That's not how He ministers. That's not what He ministers from. He ministers from love, and so you're worried and distracted by many things. But I love, and then of course He turns and He says, "But your sister right here, but Mary, what she's doing, is the one thing. Only one thing is necessary." And I love that. Only one thing is necessary, He says to Martha. And if you think about that, I don't know if I believe that. Like, yeah. No, Jesus, no, you're wrong. Listen, my boss says there's more than one thing necessary. Yeah. All right, like I got my, there's expectations here. Like there's more than one thing. And yes, but what he's saying is this needs to be the priority of your life. Like you need to wrap everything else around this. And what was it? To sit at Jesus' feet, not for content, not for for whatever ministry we're doing or trying to do, but to simply sit at Jesus' feet because Jesus is enough. And I love what he says. And he says, and what she has chosen, right, was to sit at his feet, will not be taken away from her. Mm. And what is he talking about? That the moment and the times we spend with Jesus, that can't be taken away. What we learn and glean and how our hearts are loved and, how we're loved by Jesus. And that's not taken away. You can't take that away. That's where we grow and are nurtured and you name it. In fact, from that is where we minister. That's where we truly minister. That's where we get our priorities right. Right. Martha's priorities all wrong.
Yeah.
Because of what she was motivated by. But when we sit at Jesus' feet, he gives us his heart. And then we're motivated by that same heart. And we're driven by that same heart. And you can't really you can't get off too far mm-hmm. when that's where we start from. And so for me, those are the comeback twos that when I feel like I'm getting a little fast paced or I feel like I'm getting a little frantic. And it's crazy because I feel it now. Like before, I didn't even notice it. It was so sadly normal to live that kind of pace and anxiety and drivenness that I couldn't even notice it. But Jesus had slowed me down to a point now I feel it. Like I feel anxiety at a point I never would have felt it before. Yeah. Like I feel this drivenness at times when it tries to rise up that I would have never felt before. For me, this was normal. This is adrenaline. Like this is how you live. Like I don't understand people sit there like, take a break. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, yeah, it was foreign to me. But now this what Unhurried Life did for me. It put this rhythm. This rhythm of, yes, there's going to be, yes, I think I'm actually now, Steve, probably being more, and I don't like the word like productive, but I think I'm being more fruitful
Yeah.
I've ever been.
Yeah.
And yes, the character and quality of Christ in my life, I believe I'm a better husband. I'm a better dad now. I'm a better neighbor because I'm present. I'm not just walking in my house. I'm too busy. I ain't got time to sit outside and, you know what I mean? Go out, I just shut my garage door, that, and but not no more. You know what I mean? Like to play with my kids now, you know what I mean? Be present as much as I can. I'm human, but there's an awareness there now.
Yeah.
And it is huge because it lets me know that I'm off. That red flag goes up and I'm like, okay, Lord, you know what I mean? And so anyway, I mean, yeah, and I hope young guys or even older. I mean, it's really across the board. It no matter how old you are, if you're running at that pace, I do believe younger guys have some more margin because I do believe there's a physiological aspect to it that, I think younger guys, they still will burn out and stuff, but I think there's some, and I could be wrong, on this, but, there's just be real. They're younger, they're more energetic. It's physiologically there for them. You know what I mean? And as you get older, testosterone's running out, all that stuff is, going down, energy levels. But yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that you can't burn out at 25. You obviously can't because people do, but they're running really, really hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that probably has to do with just like knowing yourself as well, because I think we all have different capacities, and just being honest with ourselves and knowing, hey, if I only had this capacity, don't push yourself beyond that. Like rely upon Christ to do, where we are weak, He is strong. Don't try to be that strength yourself. And I think a lot of times we try to push ourselves way beyond what our own capacities really are. And sometimes, it is when we're younger and maybe we're getting up in years a little bit, and we were like, oh yeah, we're still 20. I'm still 20 in ministry. I can still do all this, and maybe our capacity is changing over the time, or anything like that. I think we just got to be honest with ourselves and rely on Christ to be there for us instead of us trying to do it on our own.
Yeah.
So
good, man. That's really good.
So, any other last minute tips before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. If people just made time for Sabbath, intentionally made time for Sabbath. I don't even want to know the numbers if you ask people if they took a Sabbath, what they would be. And I think practical tips for Sabbath are what I told my friend, and I've told others since. Make that block for you. Like the reason why I do, and the Jewish calendar just works out great in this way, is that the reason why I do a Tuesday night from 6 or 7 to Wednesday night 6 or 7 is because I'm never fully blacked out for a whole day. So if I, does that make sense? So that if someone needed me or I needed to make a phone call or a text here and needed to touch base with someone, that if they contacted me on Tuesday, at 9 o'clock, they're going to get me Wednesday at 6. You know what I mean? Or if they contacted me Wednesday at 8 in the morning, they're going to get me at Wednesday at, you know what I mean, at when I get, so there's not this they're not going to hear from me if they contacted me, say, I'm trying to think of the timeline there. If they contact me, we'll just say Tuesday night late, they're not going to hear from me till Thursday morning when I wake up. You know what I mean? If I did a whole 24 hours, well, it's all 24 hours actually, and listen, and don't get there are days it's only been 20 hours, cause it's just, you know what I mean? Don't be legalistic on this, but be legalistic on, you better take a pretty good sized block out to be with Jesus.
Yeah.
And I don't care. One guy did, for him it was he would leave he had some morning duties he had to do, and he'd leave at 11 and he'd come back the next day at 11. Or he'd come back the next day at 10. Hey, but that block was intentional Sabbath. And that's what I mean. Be creative. Listen, God, our God's a creative God. He's not, it's okay. Don't be rigid with, I've got to be with Jesus, but be creative in how you do that. You know what I mean? But you got to do it. I mean, how long? I don't know. I mean, you're married. How long is your relationship going to last if you don't create intentional time with your wife? Eye to eye, and face to face. And yeah, you may do life together, but intimacy is everything. Intimacy is the goal, not accomplishment. And we know plenty of families who do a lot together and are a hot mess because they're never taking the time to be with each other. Right. So, so if I could say that, just if you just start at Sabbath, that alone is going to help tremendously. It's going to help tremendously. And just like I said, it's going to contain 3 components. It's going to contain always your relationship with Christ. There's going to be intentional time with Jesus. And then it's going to be like some of my Sabbaths look like it's me and my kids or me and my wife or me and even good friends. And I've spent the time with Jesus, and then we're doing something in the day. Other times it's it's me and Jesus in the morning, and then I'm golfing. Or maybe it's all three. It's me and Jesus in the morning for a big time. Then me and my friends are golfing. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And it's going to have, it's always going to have the Jesus component, obviously, but then it's going to have those other three components somewhere in it. And and I always remember that. And that's different because that's renewal. Yeah. Relaxation's different. Relaxation, that doesn't really refuel us, but like watching TV and that binge, that's a break, but that's not renewing. You know what I mean? That's not refueling. Time with Jesus is, and that's what Sabbath's for, to be with him. And it just and all that other stuff is a byproduct. We don't do Sabbath for that stuff. It's a byproduct of being with Jesus. I want to have that intentional time, and that really that that time that can't be broken with him. You know what I mean? That people can't come in and aren't coming in your office, and even my family knows, my wife knows, there's a couch downstairs that's similar to the one I'm sitting on right now, that, and I'm not like a turd about it. Even my family, like my kids want to come in and talk, they know they'll come in, but they know that I'm going to spend some real time with Jesus, and then I'm going to spend some real time with you. And because I've been able to do that, they know, and it's really cool because they know, like, oh, I'm getting way more time with Daddy than I ever have. Because once he's done with Jesus, he's going to spend time with me because I'm going to be intentional about that too, because that's what Sabbath's about. You know what I mean? And so it's not about my work, because Jesus is going to take care of that. And ultimately, that's what it says, that you can trust Jesus enough to take care of everything else. And it's been amazing, Steve. I can tell you, and I won't because we're running out of time, but I can tell you story after story of what Jesus has done behind the scenes while I've just been doing Sabbath with him. And listen, I've never come off a Sabbath. I mean, listen, for over 2 years, 2.5 years now, I haven't missed a Sabbath.
That's awesome.
And I don't say that to say, oh, I haven't. I'm just saying, like, listen, if this was broken, if this, you know what I mean? Like, I would have given up.
Yep.
I said, this doesn't work. That was a good try, nice experiment.
Clearly, things are falling apart when I'm doing this. I got to go back to work.
Yeah, and you just see Jesus just hold his end of the deal. And it's awesome, and I'm not going back as best as I can try. I mean, that's my intention.
Yeah. Anyway. I think so many of us get caught up. I think, especially when it involves leadership, and you've got so many different things you're balancing or trying to balance and put weight in different places, and the non-intuitive thing is to take a step back and take a restful time and spend time with the Father. Like our gut, I think a lot of times just says, "Oh, I gotta lean in more. I gotta do everything. I gotta lose more hours of sleep. I gotta cut back time over here because I gotta get things done." But when it really comes down to it, and the Bible is incredibly clear about this, we just don't see it a lot of times. Is that just to spend more time with Christ and trust that God is going to take care of his end of the deal, like you said.
And he does, and it's awesome. And like I said, I mean, I would challenge. I'll talk to that. Like, if anyone wants to know what, like I said, there's been emergencies like where I've had something happen, and that's fine. That's your oxen. That's your ox cart in a ditch. You know what I mean? Like, you've got, that's fine. Of course we're going to do that. You know what I mean? But we're going to walk through the grain fields with Jesus on the Sabbath. Yeah. And you're going to spend time with him, like and that's it. And that's the beautiful picture that we have. And
definitely, yeah. And I love that. We talked there today about how now you because you've been through this, God's been able to use this experience to help other youth pastors, other students that are going through some hard times and everything as well. And so, I love you were telling me the other day, but just how God has definitely turned something that was a horrible situation for you and a horrible thing to go through, but has started to use it now for his glory. And that's been really cool. And I think this recording of this podcast is one of those things. So thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and I'm grateful to Jesus. Actually, I'm great. I don't wish anyone to go through it, but I'm grateful for it. I really am, and it's rough. It's hard to look back at and talk about. But like I said, where I am today, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I wish I wouldn't have to happen like that, but God knows best, so it's okay. Yeah.
Right. I'm sure people are going to want to connect with you and maybe ask you some clarifying questions, or maybe even enter into other conversations. Yeah, what's the best way for people to engage with you online or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, social media is probably the easiest. Just if they want to go Instagram, it's just James Sabin 13. They can catch me there. If they want to email me, I'm cool with that. Pastor James at kingdomemc.com. That is a mouthful, I know, but if not, you don't have Instagram, it's probably easier if you would just probably make an Instagram account and find me there. But yeah, that'd be no problem. I would totally love to share and talk more because it's just I think it's a powerful thing, and I just want to be able to help. So yeah.
Cool. Well, man, James, I am incredibly grateful for what you've shared today. Just being open about your story and your willingness to allow God to continue to use it, even after you've been through it now, to help others that may be going through similar sort of situations. And man, it's been cool just to spend time with you over the last time. We've talked about the last couple of days. I had several days leading into this and everything as well, and just to hear what God's doing. So. Just pray blessings upon you and your ministry, and may God continue to use this experience to do some great things in other people's lives too.
And thank you, Steve. You're doing a great job, by the way.
Thank you.
All right, man.
All right. Man, I hope you were blessed by today's podcast. I really do. James has learned some amazing things that I hope have spoken into your life, that God has used to just reveal some things maybe in your life or someone else that you know that needs to hear this. Please do share this with others that need to hear it today. And while you're at it, make sure you subscribe to the Student Ministry Podcast as we continue to release episodes month after month with another amazing story after another, just what God is doing in the lives of youth workers around the world. We're just so grateful to be able to do this. And just love the fact that you guys are hearing this and everything. So make sure you do subscribe so you can always hear another one every time we release it. And also make sure you share. Like I said earlier, we love the fact that we get to do this, but we really don't get to reach as many people if you don't share. And so make sure you do share this with others that you know will enjoy it and benefit from it as well. And we also do want to thank our sponsor one more time, WorkCamp NE. Guys, if you're looking for an opportunity for your students to grow in their faith and to serve the local community, make sure you check out WorkCamp NE. Their website is workcampne.com. We thank them for their sponsorship, but we mostly thank them for what they've been doing in the lives of teenagers and youth groups across the country, allowing them to have some awesome experiences and growing in their faith in just a great situation. And so if you're looking for anything like that, make sure you do check out their website. And also, if you're on social media, make sure you connect with James, but also connect with me, Steve Cullum. I'm at Steve Cullum. That's SteveCullum on Twitter, and also on Facebook. The Student Ministry Podcast is also on social media as well. So just look for Stumin Pod. That's STUMINPOD on Twitter, and the Student Ministry Podcast on Facebook as well. We'd love for you to follow us and like us and all that sort of thing. And if you have someone we need to talk to in a future episode, make sure you shoot me a direct message or something like that. And I'd love to get in contact with other people that we need to have on this podcast. But with all that being said, we thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. And we'll be back next time with another conversation with another amazing youth worker to hear what God is doing around the world. But until then, may God bless your ministry.